Yep, good.
Yeah.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, to all delegates joining the session today. My name is Lynne. I'm Director of Research at Heriot-Watt University Malaysia campus. And if you just joined the keynote session a few minutes ago, you would have seen my Vice Chancellor talking about how international Heriot-Watt is. So I think the theme was very for today. This is one of a number of parallel sessions. This is parallel session number 3. I hope everybody's in the right place and joined the correct Teams link. And today we'll be talking about joint programmes and PhDs, how we need them and how they work. So as a reminder, you should have heard from the keynote session, today's theme, the whole theme for today is internationalisation, higher education institutions and working together. So we're now joined by hopefully 4 speakers in this session who will provide an insight into how international collaboration can both support and benefit from joint PhD programmes. So unless any corrects me, the first speaker we have is Professor Amir Sharif. Amir is currently Associate Dean, International and Accreditation and Professor of Circular Economy. Amir's research and teaching focuses on the area of food security, circular economy, operations, supply chain management, leadership, decision making and humanitarian logistics. That's a long list. I'm very impressed. He's board member for the Network Universities Higher Education Advisory Group for the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and is a member of the UKI Research Leaders Fellowship Programme. And he recently became a board member of the Stronger Universities Partnership Board for Bradford Municipal District Council. Amir, I'll hand over to you for the first presentation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lynne, and thank you and welcome colleagues to this session. It's already been a great Congress so far and I'm looking forward to this session as well. So I'm just going to share my screen if the technology allows me to do so. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Good. Hopefully you can see the main presentation rather than my notes. Yeah. So I'm going to be talking about in this session about a particular word which I think is actually quite apt for PhD programs, but also more importantly in terms of internationalization, and that is this word called nurturing, and I'll come to that as I go through the presentation. But I guess the first thing to say is that in terms of internationalization and the World Technology Universities network and Bradford's part in it, I think it's very important for me to add and to highlight the fact that this is about, I view this as, and the university views this very much as inclusivity. And we were very proud and very happy to be universities for social inclusion in 2020 by cuts to the heart of what we're about as a university. We are about inclusion, and I think the aspect of internationalization and then doctoral research, which I'll come on to, very much has to take an inclusive approach. So please bear that in mind, and that's the sort of the broader context within which I want to talk about as well. I think now just to focus on this and start getting to grips with the opportunities for doctoral programs and international doctoral programs, there are a couple of things I want to highlight and mention. So the first one of the things is perspectives. So when we talk about international collaboration, we're actually talking about a range of things to begin with. And as Associate Dean for Internationalization and partnerships as well as accreditations, one of the things that seems to always come out is, of course, terminology. Are we speaking the same language? Not necessarily English, but are we talking the same language of internationalization, collaboration, and so forth? And that's really about ensuring that we know what we're saying and what we're aiming to do. What type of collaborative provision do we want to have, and what do we need? Is it in terms of a joint degree or dual degree, or so on and so forth? The next aspect then relates to the other part of my particular role, which is around accreditation, but also more importantly in terms of QA, quality assurance. So this is about making sure that any collaboration is quality assured and meets any requirements either within country or at the international level as well. I guess lastly, the third thing then is in terms of what is the cost, what are the cost, benefits and risks of such collaboration, and how does that actually work? What is the wider sense of education in effect, and how can we make the best use of growth and innovation opportunities? If we then turn to the specifics of this particular session, which is around doctoral programs, PhD programs ostensibly, then I think there's another three things, and I like to put things in threes. Just to check, can everybody still see my screen? I can't actually see the chat, but I know there's things pinging. Is everybody okay?
You can, yeah, all good.
Thank you. So I just wanted to check that. So focusing on PhD programs, I think there's three key things in my mind, and having worked with partners and universities overseas, including universities such as Ahlia University, and it's great to see Ammar al-Hawaj on this session as well. I've worked with Ammar in previous institution, but also at Bradford as well. You know, these are some of the things that I've learned from colleagues as well. So in terms of PhD programs, clearly the PhD program is the gold standard in terms of research fundamentals and the fundamental basis of higher education, which is research. Of course, teaching is as well, but then that teaching is based upon research. So it is a bedrock of any good university to have a PhD program or a doctoral program, and that's certainly something which not all universities have, but universities which are committed to higher education will normally want to have and pursue a PhD program. Of course, the reason for having a PhD program is to grow the talent pool of future research leaders, and that's really, really important. And I'm glad Lynne mentioned the work that I do with UKRI, which is all about future leaders and about developing future research leadership. That's absolutely vital in any country, not just the UK. And the third thing is about the collaboration. This is about partnership. It's about shared outcomes. What are those results that we're looking for from an international program, from international doctoral programs? It's about alignment to institutional themes, be that research-based, be that teaching-based. It has to have some sort of shared meaning for the partners that are involved, I think. And again, I've seen that from my own personal experience with doctoral programs in the UK and overseas in various capacities. I'm not going to linger on the next few slides too long, but I just wanted to highlight some of the trends and some of the insights that a few bodies around the world have identified in terms of doctoral programs, and I'm happy to share these slides afterwards. I know the session is being recorded as well. But just in terms of subject trends, certainly in the UK at least, the doctoral research trends are tending to focus a lot on STEM subjects as opposed to non-STEM subjects, but that is rapidly changing. And of course, this is a network which is based upon technology, but technology, as we know, can mean lots of different things. It can be sort of hard technology, the sciences, or it could be the application of technology as well. So that picture is always changing. But that's certainly a view in the UK. If we have a look at Europe, and this is from a report from EUACDE in terms of doctoral education in Europe. The picture there, as you can see, and I haven't really zoomed in on it, is about the level and percentage of students who carry out or are involved . And as you can see, the darker colors there highlight student populations of each of those countries from these 1,300 or so HEIs that were surveyed, where there's a large percentage of students who enjoy and actually pursue doctoral studies. Of course, the UK is somewhere in the middle within that, so there's obviously some obvious trends there. Within that report, actually, there were some interesting findings, and just to highlight a few of them, you know, what are the key things for doctoral research programs? Well, a lot of it's around funding. A lot of the focus is around ethics as well, and of course internationalization. We can't get away from that. But there's another important aspect, which is about gender equality. And that's really important when we start to look at different markets for doctoral programs. Are we actually providing parity for doctoral research across the male-female divide? And that's really important. Giving that accessibility is key there. If we look and turn to the US, and again, I'm not going to go through each one of those bullet points there, but there's some interesting findings from research that was carried out by the National Science Foundation in America, which highlights an increasing trend towards the point that I'm making: increasing diversity, increasing inclusivity, and increasing interest from candidates around the world in actually wanting to pursue doctoral studies. So doctoral studies and doctoral programs are actually a growth area for universities that want to pursue them. And that's really exciting, because all of our universities that are involved in the network, pretty much we all are engaged or have collaborations which support doctoral research. Let's just turn briefly to experiences. And there are some experiences which are pretty important to take into account. And I'll just zap through these. But as you'll see there, the key thing about doctoral programs is not necessarily about the technical or the philosophical aspects of doctoral programs. It is about the soft skills. It is about the human aspects. We have to make sure that those aspects are enshrined in the doctoral programs which we provide. And so I think there are, and I'm trying to sum up very quickly here. I do have a few more slides, but I know that we're pushed for time, and I'll try and jump ahead if I can. I think there are 4 key things that really make a doctoral program successful, an international doctoral program successful: capability, capacity, coordination, and completion. The first 2 are sort of obvious from any university perspective, but I think the last 2 are really, really important, and they're inherently important. Coordination is really critical here. Partners that are engaged in PhD programs overseas need to have that level of coordination, have to have an appreciation of cross-cultural awareness as well, but also in terms of completion must remain committed. These are long-term programs for students. In the US, the average length is 7.5 years. In the UK, it's 3 years, and the rest of the world is somewhere in between. But quite literally, jumping to my last slide or so, I'm just going to jump. I did have a few more slides, but I just want to jump to the last slide if I can. I'll jump all of this because this was a longer presentation. What really makes an international PhD program work? And I think the giveaway is this picture that you can see in the background, the stylized picture. And this is based upon some experiences that University of Bradford and myself I've had in working with PhD programs, doctoral students as well, in a range of different countries, both in Europe, but also in the Gulf and the MENA region as well, principally. And without taking too much more time, I think it really does boil down to 4 or 5 real key points. The last one being trust. Doctoral programs have to be based on trust around shared vision, shared commitment, and also, and increasingly important is, what impact are we having on society? Are we actually changing the nature and the face of research institutions and the research activity in the countries that we are partnering with? Now, that's actually a very large topic, and I'm sure that's actually beyond even this particular session. But the benefits of doctoral programs, international doctoral programs, are there. They're self-evident, and I think as a network and a group of institutions, we need to see if we can actually leverage those opportunities and see if we can support the development of future research leaders. So on that note, I'll just end there. I know we were pushed for time. I did have some more slides as ever. That's what professors do. They tend to have lots more information than is needed. But thank you very much. I'm happy to take questions either now or later on. So I'll just pass back control now to colleagues, if that's fine.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Amir. Really interesting, really good start to the session, and some really important messages, actually. We'll take some questions at the end of the session, if you don't mind. We have hopefully 3 more speakers to hear from. I suspect there might be some common themes, so sure. We'll take some questions at the end. So next we will hear from Dr. Ramya. A quick introduction of Dr. Ramya. She's currently Professor in the Centre for Automation and Robotics at the Hindustan Institute of Technology. She has over 20 years of teaching experience, and her research activities focus on artificial intelligence and soft computing techniques, with a particular emphasis on AI and image processing applications. And she's also associate editor of the international journal Image Analysis and Stereology. Dr. Ramya, we will pass to you in just a second. I see your slides are up on the screen, so we're good to go. Can I just remind everyone on the call, can you just mute your microphone whilst we are listening to the speakers, and then we can unmute when we get to the Q&A session. It just helps with the audio and the connectivity. Thank you very much. So Dr. Ramya, across to you.
Yeah. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending upon the various times. Yeah, I'm, of course, here to talk about the joint programs and PhDs, why we need them and how they work. And I'm here to talk about the initiatives taken by Hindustan Institute of Technology and Science towards the internationalization of the curriculum and various programs that we offer. These are the different internationalization of program methods we have, the various formats of internationalization. We have a study abroad program, which is more of an individual, it depends upon the individual needs and the agreements. And later we moved on to the academic exchange programs, where it's a mutual agreement between both the institutions. And then we have a study program with an integrated element. And then we moved on with dual degree and the international joint programs. Now here I'm going to focus more upon the joint learning program, where we would have both the partners having a joint learning outcome. And it's more of an integrated study program, which is actually developed and managed jointly by the partnering institutions, which could be 2 or even more at times. We have been promoting these joint programs depending upon the benefits that the students would actually have, because these programs actually provide access to complementary facilities and resources. It gives you a great exposure to cultural approaches towards research and academia. Of course, it mobilizes the international student movement. It enhances the acquisition of research and transferable skills, and they get adapted to the different skill sets and the technology used in the other institutions. And such joint programs actually provides a better networking opportunity for students who involve into these programs in order to connect to more people, and eventually they land up with a better job prospects. And these are the key points why we are looking into the joint programs. Now we follow this 3-stage process when we try to implement a joint program. The first one is a proposal stage, where the program rationale and the complementarity of awarding institutions is taken into consideration. Then we come out with a joint program outline spec initially to start with. So we specify what would be the objectives behind going for such a joint program. Of course, when we go with a proposal, we look into the costs involved and the resources that are required. We also take into consideration the quality assurance and the operational arrangements that are required. Now, once the proposal stage gets passed through, then we go into the development stage, where there is a consortium, there's an agreement between the partnering institutions, wherein we try to frame the program curriculum, the student services, how we manage the program. The quality assurance again comes into picture, and then we also look into the legal clauses. Now, upon development, we take into the management stage when the joint program is actually launched. Now there comes, we frame what should be and how should be the student application, admission, and what will be the enrollment procedures. Teaching and learning methodologies are finalized, and finally what would be the degree and diploma supplement. We also come into an agreement on the information and marketing procedures that are involved in management stage. Now, When you look at the proposal stage, we follow two approaches. One is a bottom-up approach and the other one is a top-down approach. The top-down approach starts from the overall, the highest level of institution. So the management of the highest level of institution, actually they decide upon the institution with whom we need to propose a joint program on, and the general policy document is developed and that gets passed on to the departments, and then the faculty will work on developing the curriculum later on. On the other hand, we also have a bottom-up approach where the initiative comes from the faculty, and the departments or the faculty in the department, we prepare proposal and we align it to the strategic policy that is developed after the institution's policy. And this moves on to the highest level later on, and then the agreement between the partnering institution gets signed. Now, if you look at the various proposals that we have, the initiatives taken up by our institution, I've just listed down few institutions with whom we have agreements with, and I would like to cite upon this especially the Leeds University UK, which our own department is involved. Now we have a collaborative research project with Leeds University UK, which is funded by the Royal Academy of Engineering, and based upon the collaboration and when we looked at the complementary resources that are available between us and Leeds University, we thought we should be offering a joint program. So especially in this university, we actually followed a bottom-up approach, though there was a general MOU which was already there with Leeds University, especially for this joint program, we took a bottom-up approach. On the other hand, in few other universities, we also followed a top-down approach, depending upon how we start with. And then when it comes to the development stage, we try to focus upon the program information. Both the institutions would actually agree on the objectives and the duration of the program. The duration of the program would vary depending upon what program we finalize upon. And then when it comes to the program management, we would form a supervisory or an advisory committee wherein there will be a minimum of at least one supervisor from each partnering institution, and this is to just ensure that the essential facilities at the collaborating institutions are suitable and will actually allow the students to conduct their study or research at a satisfactory level. And we also have a proper documentation on the credit transfer, provided it is allowed for some equivalent or similar courses. At the development stage, we also take into consideration the legal clauses, and these legal clauses will be subject to the countries, the law and the court jurisdiction, depending on where the cause of action actually arises. The quality assurance will actually look into the partnering institutions to take up the responsibility for ensuring the quality of education provided. So as I said, the joint program, the duration would differ. As of now, we have for the dual PhD, the duration is for about 2 to 5 years, where the minimum residential at each institution is set to 2 semesters or 12 months, which is a year. And for the masters and undergrad, the duration would range between 1 to 3 years or 1 to 4 years respectively, and the minimum residential at each institution would be 6 months or a semester. Now, when it comes to the management stage, we look into the admission process, and both the institutions, we actually agree on the admission and the recruitment of the students into the program. So depending upon each course, the eligibility and the conditions that are required for the selection of the student varies. Of course, the curriculum is actually framed taking into consideration the advices from the supervisory or the advisory committee, where again the faculty members from each institution will play a major role. Teaching learning methods are finalized for each course, and the information and marketing, whatever information we have is supplied by the parties coming into consideration. Now, when the curriculum is taken into consideration, we have a comprehensive internationalization on curriculum where we not only look into the content, we also take into consideration the faculty, the student mobility, the collaboration and the practices that are involved in the delivery of the course content. So when framing the curriculum, we have the faculty from the universities abroad, and the professional societies play a major role, and the industries where you're trying to provide this program also plays a role in forming the curriculum, the learning outcomes. All these are the stakeholders in bringing in an internationalization to the curriculum. These are few examples. In terms of the courses that are offered for digital transformation, we have Ammar and Japan, which actually provides an internship and placement. For courses like geometric modeling, for visualization and communication, we have inputs from the Purdue University. They offer this content, and a few other courses like cost engineering, industrial IoT, information technology and operation technology, digital marketing. Now all these, of course, Bradford University is contributing towards framing the curriculum and the course content delivery of the digital marketing and the business analytics. When it comes to the joint research program, we also, these joint PhD programs allows supervisor from both the partnering institutions. So we will have dual supervisors taking in the supervision, taking into the supervision of the. Okay. Okay. So.
Dr. Ramya, please continue. Can I ask everybody else to mute, please? Dr. Ramya, I think you're almost done, but please continue. Thank you.
Right. Okay. So we would have comparative research projects involved in joint research programs, and these research projects would require techniques and equipment or the resources that should be available in both the universities, and sometimes the resources would be complemented. And we also have industrial and public sector involvement in both the countries. There would be a dual supervision which allows complementary approaches to research questions, and such programs will also give us an opportunity to take up a transdisciplinary research projects as well. Yeah, and I'm actually presenting this on behalf of Dr. Ilawalagan, who is Director of International Affairs, and he just requested me to present this on his behalf in order to maintain a gender equality from our institution. So for any queries related to the collaboration towards the internationalization or the joint programs, you may please feel free to contact this mail ID. Thank you.
Lovely, Dr. Ramya. Thank you very much, and some really good examples there of how you have been able to make this work from Hindustan. Really excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we have a slight change in the running order as presented. So we'll now move to what was noted as speaker number 4. We now have Professor Ammar Hawaj. He's a marketing and communications professional with particular expertise in the domain of transnational education and collaborative provision. He joined Ahlia University in 2011, and he currently holds the post of Director of International Relations. In his capacity as Director of International Relations, Ammar sits on both the Brunel University PhD Joint Board and the George Washington University Engineering Management and Systems Engineering Off-Campus Programme Board. Again, very strong credentials. Thank you for joining us, Prof. Ammar. So we now pass to you for your presentation.
Thank you for the introduction, Lynne. I'd also like to thank the WTUC network and Ahlia University for this opportunity. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. Yeah, all good.
All right. So I'm quite happy to see that the different speakers have taken different approaches to this session, and mine relates to the why we need them part, specifically in terms of leveraging these international partnerships and joint programs to achieve strategic objectives and sustain a competitive advantage. So just a brief introduction for those of you who are not too familiar with Ahlia University. We were the first private university in 2001. From the very beginning, since inception, we had a very much international outlook, which was, as per the founders, this was their vision, to be an outstanding regional and academic institution. And so I have a select sample of some of our strategic goals. We have a number of strategic goals. These are the most pertinent here: to strengthen AU to be ranked in the top 5 of the Gulf private universities. And this has in fact been achieved prior to the end of our strategic plan. Our current strategic plan runs from 2016 to 2020. So we're at the very end of it. To become the institution of choice in the Kingdom of Bahrain and to engage in relevant research with outputs. So the strategic partnerships that we have formed over the past few years, firstly, University London. This was our first strategic partnership in 2004. It's a multifaceted partnership. We have student exchanges, an articulation program, and this partnership was culminated with in 2007 with the PhD program. We call it a PhD without residence program. So it's a Brunel University award. However, it's very much a joint program with faculty from both institutions serving on the program, and we have dual pathways in business and information systems. And so this program has been thriving since 2007, and it's come to represent really a the region. It was quite bespoke and new at the time. One of our other major collaborations and strategic partnerships is with the George Washington University. This was formed in 2009, and again, it's thriving today. We have more than 100 graduates in the program who are in very senior level positions in industry. The beauty of this program is that quite a significant number of the students enrolled in the program have industry-based and industry-focused dissertations that are applied in the workplace. One of them, for instance, is a simulation project for optimization of production planning, and that was adopted by an organization in the private sector. So the big question here again is who benefits? Who benefits from these joint programs and PhDs? My colleague, Professor Amir, explained in length about some of the benefits of the program, the joint programs and PhDs. As he said, this should be a win-win situation for everybody. It's not one partner using another. It's both partners benefiting, and who benefits? All of stakeholders, all the stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders? The regulator, the country, the students, the employers, and both parties. So if we look at the macro picture, national strategies in Bahrain, including the Higher Education Council strategy for research and education in Bahrain, this is the regulating body. We can see as part of their goals, Bahrain being first choice in education as a destination. And through our PhD program, and here I have just a sample of the IT pathway, which is one of the dual pathways. The business pathway has been more popular. However, the IT pathway is gaining traction. But we've attracted a lot of GCC students, an American, a South African. So these are some of the data points and figures that I can share. We can see the national plan for the advancement of Bahraini women, which is very much linked to the SDGs and very much related to the gender equality pledge that members of the WTUN have signed recently, which we really support fully and we uphold. 4 women were awarded PhDs. This is 4 out of 10 in the IT pathway. So it's about 50% women at the moment in our PhD programs, which is really part of what the university looks for in terms of its core values, educational excellence, educational opportunity, etc. So if we look at some of the performance indicators that we have as part of our strategic plan 2016-2020, this is just a select sample of about 52 indicators that we have, and these represent around 25% of our indicators. All these indicators are directly served through our partnerships and through the joint programs. If we talk about the ranking, if we look at QS, if we look at Times Higher, if we look at most of the major ranking league tables, the research output is quite an important indicator and accounts for 40, 50% depending on the body that we're looking at. And so the partnership has really supported us in this way, and we've achieved our objective ahead of the end of the lifetime of our strategic plan, being one of the top 5 private universities in the Gulf. If we look at faculty and staff development, faculty retention, research capacity building programs, these are all served directly through these programs. And we have with Brunel University an academy of supervisors through which our own faculty are trained and approved as research supervisors. They get an international credential as such and build their competencies in this area. And this has really helped us achieve our targets, other targets in relation to research active supervisors, research active faculty. Currently, about 85% of our faculty publish at least one peer-reviewed journal or an indexed journal paper per year. And so this is also helping us achieve other performance indicators indirectly, such as accreditation, more specifically AACSB accreditation, where the majority of faculty have to be research active. Short learning programs, these are also other very interesting byproducts. This is one of our performance indicators. This is one of the byproducts of collaboration and working towards putting in place joint programs or joint programs that exist already. So this was a project that was born out of our collaboration with the University of Bradford. So we're working on a number of programs with Bradford, including an articulation, which is hopefully soon to be activated. And part of this collaboration has led to collaborating in terms of student exchange. So we developed a program called Entrepreneurs Across Borders. We received students for the past 3 years from a number of universities, including Bradford and then other partner schools that we work with, Grande École in France, such as YSEG, Epitech in the field of IT, and Saudi Arabia as well. It was a short-term study abroad program that was quite busy, and students enjoyed it because it integrated a cultural aspect with a learning aspect, workshops, site visits, and ending with a competition. If we talk about benefits to stakeholders in general, again, the stakeholders are the employers, the stakeholders are the students themselves, the stakeholders include the partner institutions. So in relation to Brunel University, for instance, the majority of graduates out of the IT PhD program have continued to publish as part of their lifelong learning, as part of their new positions. We see one of the graduates, one of our first graduates in 2009 is currently the Director of Scientific Research in the Higher Education Council, the regulator in Bahrain. Another graduate from Kuwait currently works in the Amiri court, the Amiri Diwan in Kuwait. Number of publications since 2012 is 7. So the benefits accrue and the benefits do not stop at any point in time. I'm actually currently enrolled in the PhD program myself. So not a doctor quite, but hopefully soon. And I'm quite happy that I've managed in the last year to publish 2 papers in highly ranked journals and Q2 journals with my supervisors. So these are live examples of the benefits accruing from these collaborations. Finally, international reputation and ranking. This cannot be ignored. When working with the universities abroad, Professor Abdallah, the chairman, talked about collaboration. The name of the session, I believe, relates to collaboration. So collaboration is a must. When we collaborate and when we benefit and when we work in partnership, this will lead to benefits and rewards to all parties. Again, the focus when it comes to postgraduate and PhD programs is revolves around research and research production. And so this has enabled Ahlia to achieve some of its strategic objectives and targets in relation to its international ranking and international profile, where we are currently one of the top 50 Arab region universities out of about 1,000 universities. This has also helped us achieve a respectable ranking in the inaugural Times Higher University Impact Ranking in relation to quality education. And my colleague Isra will be explaining more and presenting on SDGs tomorrow. I would like to end the presentation by a quote from President Lyndon B. Johnson, the 37th President of the United States. I believe international education cannot be the work of one country. It's the responsibility and promise of all nations. It calls for free exchange and full collaboration. And this, I believe, applies fully to universities as well, institutions and organizations that comprise a country and a nation. So collaboration is a must, and collaboration is even more important during these days with COVID-19 and such developments. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Ammar. Again, a really interesting presentation, and I think we would definitely agree with that final sentiment. Absolutely. Thank you. So we have one final speaker in this session. We will move to that, and then we have a Q&A. Can I remind everybody who was on the session, as we near the end of the 4 presentations, we have the Q&A session approaching. Feel free to post your questions in the chat. We welcome them. We have plenty of time for Q&A discussion after the final speaker. So if I can now move to introduction of speaker number 4, we have Professor Kingston I knew I would get the pronunciation wrong. I do apologise. Nyamapfene, who's currently Vice Chancellor of the University of Africa in Nigeria. This is a relatively new state university that was established by the Bielsa state government and created to serve as a model for how state governments can reduce the burden of higher education through public-private partnerships. The university focus on internationalization, so very fitting with the theme today. For 3 years prior to this, Professor Kingston was president of the African University of Science and Technology. This is a postgraduate-only science and engineering university in Nigeria, renowned for its research and high-quality graduates. So, Professor Kingston, I'm hoping you are on the line. Your connection should, fingers crossed, should hold, and we invite you to share your slides and begin the presentation. I just want to check we can hear you, Professor Kingston. We can see the slides. Can I check and see if anybody else can hear? No, Amir, you're shaking your head. Thank you.
Yeah,
okay.
I was going to say I can't hear anything
No,
apart from yourself.
thank you. Yeah, thank you. Professor Kingston, I wonder if we can give you just a second to try and repair the audio. I think we have sufficient time, so we'll be patient. We'll give you just some time to, you might want to disconnect and reconnect, I'm not sure. We'll leave it with you to do what's best. So I think we should use the waiting time to think of the questions that we want to ask. Always an opportunity. So hopefully you are crafting the questions for the Q&A session.
As the amazing conferences that share a common footprint, we hope to be some of their most important partners and providers for students. So let me move to the slide. This is really perhaps to stimulate some discussion in a moment, and that is what opportunities could there be to better utilise WTUN for developing alternative models for the sorts of things that we've talked about together so far in this session. So, for example,
Professor Kingston, can you hear us?
With industrial partners in our post-COVID world, what might success look like for us as a global?
And I think we need your help here with the technical aspects.
Is effectively creating more active of visiting professors and
Hi, is that Professor Kingston?
What are we going to?
Hi, Professor Kingston, can we hear you?
So I think, Zenia, I can hear my own Vice Chancellor's speech from presentation from earlier.
Okay.
So I think Professor Kingston is replaying something that has been recorded. But Professor Kingston, I don't know, Zenia, if you muted, but Professor Kingston, we need you to be unmuted, and if you can, let's check. We obviously have the audio connection now, but let's see if we can share your slides and begin the presentation. Zenia, are you controlling the mute, or is that done locally?
I've just muted that just
Okay.
right now. But if Mr. Kingston would like to unmute himself, we should be able to hear you.
Okay, I think you might have to do that too if you were managing the meeting. But Professor Kingston, if you can you unmute or perhaps put something in the chat to let us know if you are connected okay, if the audio is working, and if you can share your slides.
I can't unmute other participants, I can only mute them. So if you're able to unmute, that would be fantastic.
Okay, I suggest we give it another few seconds, and if we continue to struggle, then we just move to the Q&A.
Hello?
Are you on mute?
Oh, hello?
Hello?
Hello? We can hear
Godwin.
Hi. Oh, hi. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Fantastic. Yes,
Right.
wonderful. So, Lynne, I think we're back.
Okay, good. Okay, so on the assumption that we are all good to go, can I introduce again Professor Kingston? Professor Kingston, we have run through your introduction. I'm not sure if you heard it or not. We have your slides back. I think we have audio that will be sufficient. And if you would just like to start your presentation, thank you.
I need to know if I can unmute myself. Mute. Okay. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Yes, we can hear you.
Hi. Yes. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. This is Kingston Nyamapfene. I guess it's my turn to go now, right?
Yes,
okay.
Please.
And just let me know, will I be able to change slides from here, or are you going to be doing that for me?
Hi, Professor. I can do that for you. If you want to prompt me by saying next slide, I can move on to the next slide for you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right. Yeah, that's better. Something was happening. The screen went blank. Somebody was trying to call in or something like that. Okay, so if we can immediately go to the very next slide. Thank you very much. Before I talk to the points that I have there, the bullet points that I have there, I just want to point out that this particular subject appeals to me greatly because in many ways I speak from personal experience because my own PhD was done more or less in the fashion of a partnership where I was working back here in Africa at a research station and interacting with a local supervisor as well as a supervisor in the UK. And that really turned out to be an incredible advantage, giving me exposure to sort of the best of both worlds, working with somebody who's very knowledgeable in terms of the local situation that I was working on, as well as somebody who from the UK side was very deeply steeped in the academic traditions that apply in terms of supervising someone at doctoral level. I think that having listened to what people were discussing in one of the sessions on internationalization in general, it was sort of a pity that we could not combine these two sessions because there were some overlaps on the ideas that were being shared there, particularly around internationalization and how a key principle is reciprocity, which I think from an African perspective is something that has been seriously lacking for a very long time, that in many cases these partnerships tended to be dictated on the terms that were drawn up by the senior partners, as it were, those who were coming in with proposals for partnerships. So that reciprocity element that came up in that one discussion was really a valid one. And, you know, if you may just allow me another 15 seconds of digression here. The situation created by the pandemic that we're having to deal with right now which really started off as a challenge, has turned out to be a great opportunity for doing the kind of things that we're referring to here when we talk about joint programs and PhDs. But that's really a subject for a different panel session. So let me get back to the joint programs and the PhDs and why we need them. I'm focusing really on the PhD, and maybe here and there I might make general reference to other kinds of programs. The PhD is a particularly strong nuclear point for fostering a research culture, particularly in institutions that have limited resources and limited research capacity. Now, I say this because I'm in a very young institution. We haven't even graduated our first cohort of bachelor's level students. And you can imagine, therefore, that in terms of our staffing as well, it means in many cases, we have a very large number of relatively young both in age and young in terms of their years along the career path. People who may or may not already have a PhD, and in the case of those who do not have a PhD, based on experience from another institution or a couple of other institutions, one of the challenges I found out is that in many cases, people do not even understand the research process. And so the mentoring that is needed for them to get into that does not necessarily always come from within their own institution. There may not be the capacity within their own institution. So partnerships of this nature become critical and particularly important. Because the kind of work that goes on at the PhD level has a degree of depth and intensity that, you know, when you take on the responsibility of supervising doctoral work, you're really making a serious commitment for the benefit of the candidate, as well as in some ways for your own benefit, advancing your career and perhaps co-publishing and things like that. So it is really an effective way to get collaboration going between partner institutions because of the clear potential for mutual benefits that I have just mentioned here. In terms of the examples of how some of these things can or have been done, I have at various points in my life been involved in faculty development programs, which were done through partnerships with universities, particularly universities in North America and universities in the UK. And so the models that are possible, you know, there are quite a number of them. They range from having students or candidates go and spend time at the partner institution, which could be just a few weeks to a year or two, to the possibility of just going there for a few weeks to work in a laboratory if it's scientific work that's being done, and so on. And then you also have models where what really happens is that the candidate never leaves their home country or their home campus, but they are getting significant input from a sort of co-supervisor from the partner institution. I may be galloping a little bit because I've got my own timer here, so I'm also looking at the time. And the third one, which we found very useful, and I'm being careful here by using the word cheap, because I'm not trying to cheapen the people that we're talking about, but it's a way to potentially share who are in the late stages of their candidacy. And what we found was that if you needed people to teach sort of at the 100 or 200 level. You could negotiate with some of the partner institutions that had strong PhD programs to lend you 1 or 2 of their late stage PhD to help out with some of that teaching. So while they're doing that, they come to your institution and they gain new insights in terms of what happens in a higher education institute in a totally different environment from the one in which they normally spend time. And then what else happens is that this turns out to be very good training for them. A number of universities in the UK, in the US now, insist on their doctoral candidates in their final stages to take on some sort of full-time instructional responsibility because it enhances their CV when they start looking for jobs in the university system to say, I have actually had some teaching experience. So it's a win-win situation in that sense. So we can go on to the next one. Sorry. So that part there, I have already sort of touched upon that. It is a trade. I don't know why. Okay. Okay, all right. So the training opportunity for late stage PhD candidates, I've already made that point. And you know, it also is a way to optimize the use of certain material resources. I think of a situation where I have seen inequities where some universities have really good high-end laboratory equipment, electron microscopes, scanning, and whatever types they might have. They might have microprobes and things like that, which somebody doing a PhD, say in the earth sciences or the biological sciences, may need to have access to. But because of the cost, especially for younger institutions, and even for the more mature institutions, the cost may not be justifiable because it's not equipment that you're going to be using on a daily basis. And of course, there may be other priorities as well. And I have seen in some countries where the funding bodies decide the equivalent of, say, the National Research Foundation in the United States. But the example that I'm talking about here is actually from an African country where they decided they have 21 institutions of higher education. Not everyone of those 21 can have an electron microscope, this and that, this and that. And they basically decided to regionalize the distribution of resources and said, in this region, we're going to support one institution for this piece of equipment, and in the next one for that piece of equipment. So people can move around. Now, take it outside the country and look at it on a more global level. It's very similar principles that say, if we're in partnership, then when we're working together on a PhD process, where even at the point of identifying the research topic, the research issue that is going to be addressed, there's collaboration between the two sides. And that means that at a critical point where work needs to be done, analytical work needs to be done, the people or person from the less resourced institution will then have an opportunity to spend time at the other institution where those resources are available, and get the opportunity for hands-on training and exposure in various other ways. And don't forget one thing: every university has its own social milieu, its own culture, and I believe that when we have this movement of people, that infusion of a different experience has a very strong impact on who they become longer term. So these partnerships have that particular value in the context of research and research collaborations. And my final point here is that I have seen partnerships where vice chancellors travel to another country, or members of the senior management or the deans of faculties travel to other institutions, sign agreements that they're going to collaborate in very vague and broad terms. And in many cases, those partnerships just basically come to naught. Unless a partnership is hinged around a very specific activity or set of activities, it's not going to be as strong as the type of partnerships that we're talking about here. And partnering around work that is done at the doctoral level becomes very strong glue for institutional partnerships. So I will end there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Kingston. That was really, really useful. Thank you. I think some very interesting comments and an excellent way to finish the session. I have noticed I've been keeping an eye on the chat as we go. We are shorter on the Q&A time than intended, but that's okay. I think we have sufficient flexibility to take a few questions. I would invite, I have been checking the chat. I would invite, if I may, sorry, Michael Fitzpatrick, I don't know if it's Professor, but you mentioned the different models that might be used. I think there's a question there, but I do think it's worth exploring for just a second, this issue of doctoral level education. You mentioned the MDs, the DBAs have been mentioned as well. And you've mentioned also the short-term programmes that might fit better. I wonder if you'd like to comment on that, and then I might invite Amir to comment as well in response as well. So this issue around longevity of the connection and the qualification, and I think something we haven't really touched upon in this session is, does it make any difference whether this is PhD, DBA or ND, for example? We have talked about the technical component, but we haven't really mentioned ND specifically. So Michael, can I invite you to just say a bit more about your point, and then Amir, perhaps if you could respond as well, that would be good. Thank you.
Yeah, and it was really just responding to Amir's question around, do we always have to be talking about PhDs? And I think the answer is no. That in many instances, when you begin a discussion with a partner, whether that's another university or an industrial or a commercial partner, it's quite clear that what they want and what you want out of the partnership is you want to have the program that's going to last 3, 4, 5, 6 years, the outcome of which is a doctoral qualification. But it doesn't have to be a PhD. It doesn't have to be the dedication in the one focused area of one discipline. You can have something that's built up of the smaller projects with an additional talk component as well. And some of the most successful programs that we've got, they're not PhD collaborations. We do have the PhD collaborations. So I think it's, just going back to the original question that Amir asked, I think that there's now sufficient understanding from employers and from potential students that doctorates come in different shapes and sizes.
Yeah, Amir, you had your hand up. Can I encourage others as well? If you have any questions, please post in the chat or just raise your hand. But Amir, can I ask you to respond to that comment?
Sure. I actually clicked on the wrong button by mistake, but
yeah.
Thanks, Michael, for your comments and your responses there. So I actually, it was a bit of a rhetorical question, but I still was interested to hear your response. So thank you, Michael, for that. I think the reason I was asking that was because in certain markets, and this is the international context, of course, in certain markets such as the Gulf, for example, and maybe in South Asia as well, if it doesn't say PhD on the certificate, you will not get a job and you will not progress, which is unfortunate. And I completely agree with Michael as well. We have NDs, DSCs, DPhils, you know, from other universities. These are all doctorates. You know, what constitutes a doctoral program is the research component, whether it's, as you mentioned, Michael, you know, it can be several mini projects, or it can be one large research. Yes, my question was sort of rhetorical, but again, I think this is about how can we either as a network group or as separate universities try to educate and try to impress upon the wider community that indeed doctorates can come in different shapes and sizes and flavors, and it might not necessarily say PhD, but it still is a doctorate. And I think that's what I was trying to get at, which was, you know, that's one of the challenges of doctoral programs, which I didn't actually mention, but now sort of it's coming to my mind, is how the idea of a doctorate program is transferred in different markets, you know, and the value of having a PhD in some markets is, you know, that is the ultimate, well, it is of course the ultimate pinnacle of education attainment. You know, that's the highest degree you can get is a PhD, I was always told. Yes, you can get honorary ones as well, but that's the last level of human endeavor in terms of education. So, but there's different ways of getting it. That's all I had to say about it, really. But I was just intrigued to see what other people thought. You know, do we have to say mention PhD all the time? But of course, there's other forms, other different awards that are doctoral programs. So that was it, really. Thank you.
Yeah, sure, thank you, Amir. Michael, did you want to respond? Your hand's up.
Yeah, and I think it's just to reflect that the cultural change piece takes a long time. I think one of the reasons why the professional doctorates are more accepted in the UK is they've been around a while now. They've been around 20 plus years. There's been programs that have run with the teaching sector on the EdD program. So you've had schools pursuing professional doctorates. We run programs with some of our partner companies where we run professional doctorates for their senior management team. And that just begins to socialize the idea. So if you've got countries where the PhD is regarded, then basically what we need more people in those countries to be getting the practice-based doctorates. And in 20 years, it will have changed there as well.
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. And I think that really is, I was searching for the idea, but it is about those trailblazers and those sponsors of other types of doctoral program. Quite agree.
Lovely, thank you both. I had a question on, I think it was Ammar that raised the issue of leveraging strategic partnerships, and I think Dr. Ramya as well, you also mentioned a top-down and a bottom-up approach. I'm just wondering how solid has the research, where the programs we have been successful, how solid has the research connection been prior to that? And for those that have direct experience of these joint programs, have we connected in specifically to research groups, and has that had any implications for accreditation or for universities that are offering these programs? Or in other words, what level is this done at? Are you able to connect into research groups and it's a fairly easy process to facilitate? Or do we find that we do run into internationally, that we run into local accreditation, local recognition issues? I guess my question is probably to Dr. Ramya in the first instance, but Ammar, you might also like to comment.
To answer this question, I know both the approaches have been successful, but when it comes to the proposal starting from the collaborations between the faculty first, the approach is very clear. So we get to know the possibilities of collaboration, the projects that we can work, the chances of the complementing each other with the resources and all that. That seems to be easy enough to take it forward than going ahead in the top-down approach.
Okay, thank you. Ammar, yeah, you're still on the line, yeah? Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I absolutely agree with my colleague from the University of Hindustan. Both aspects of the question in terms of collaboration. That could be bottom up or top down. You always need a champion, an academic champion, to move forward the partnership and make sure that even if it starts at a personal level, it has to become institutional. And the same goes in relation to PhD programs, I guess, and in terms of research activity and research activity of students. I mean, we're quite a young university, but from since inception almost, we forged these partnerships and we've had the PhD program. And so it depends if you talk to students at which point and what kinds of students are we talking about. So in my case, I'm both a practitioner, an academic, and a student. And so if you're entering the program with an eye on being an academic and rising up the academic ladder, it's natural to fall into these and find these research groups and niche areas that universities focus on. But it's really up to the individual student. It's up to it depends on the institution they're working within. So it depends whether people are doing it for academic purposes or maybe it's a professional doctorate, as you mentioned previously, Professor Amir. So. Yeah,
and I think that resonates very nicely with what we heard from Amir in the first presentation. You talked about trust. And I guess when you make those connections, you are relying on that trust to make sure that that relationship works and that you can then build on that and see the successes we've had. Lovely, thank you, Ammar. Can I just check then? We are nearing the end of the session. I'm conscious the next one begins in 15 minutes. Can I pause a minute? I don't see any hands up and I don't see anything else in the meeting chat. But can I pause just a second? Amir, yes, go ahead.
I clicked the wrong button.
You're now muted. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, my computer's a bit lagging again. I was actually hovering over something else, but it doesn't matter. But just to say thank you to all colleagues, and of course happy to continue the discussion offline as well. I think doctoral programs are here to stay. I think there's a great future for them. As we've been talking and I've been hearing everybody's enthusiasm, I think that's really important. We always talk about other types of collaborative programs, undergraduate, master's level, but sometimes I think doctoral programs left at the back of the bus a bit. But as research-based institutions, and we're very lucky in this network. As research-based institutions, we can look to see how we can collaborate on doctoral programs as well. So, let's not forget doctoral programs in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I would absolutely agree with that. Yeah, and I do hope, I sense that there will be an opportunity for more discussion on this through WTUN, which is excellent. So I don't see any more chat, nor do I see any further hands. So Zenia, I think we call this session to a close. Can I thank all of the speakers? Actually, we've had a couple of technical glitches, but absolutely worth the wait. I mean, I think all 4 presentations really interesting, really in keeping with the theme, actually, not only of the session but of the day as well. I'm kind of wishing we had more participants than we've had because I wish more people were able to hear this. But hopefully, fingers crossed, we can continue this discussion as part of WTUN. So thank you again to all speakers. Zenia, I don't know if you want to say anything about the next session.
Yes, so we've got the WTUN showcase session coming up next, which will involve some previous participants in the change programme, Professor Lynne, and also 2 student competition winners as well from our recent WTUN student competition. So they're up next at 13:45 UK time. So if you'd like to stay for those, you're free to join that as well. But thanks everyone for their contributions today. It's been fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. That's on a different link, Zenia. Yeah, we have to close this meeting and join the new one. Yeah.
You will do. Yes, that's right.
Okay, lovely. Okay, thanks again, everyone, and hopefully see you in the next session. Thank you very much. Thank you.